And we are live. Hey everyone, back at it again. It's been a minute, and I am absolutely thankful to be back with you live again on Lead TV. Today, I have the honor of speaking with one of our most brilliant minds in the military. You got a chance to actually read through his resume. We're going to be talking with Dr. Carter today, and I hope that you enjoyed today's discussion. It's going to be based on artificial intelligence and its implementation into the military. And I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. So here we go. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Colonel Robert Carter. Hi, sir. How you doing?
Doing great. How are you doing? Again, thanks for the opportunity to talk with you. Really looking forward to the discussion tonight.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. I think I'm thankful that we made our connection. I believe it was initially through an interview I did with Colonel Thweet, and we got connected also with, I believe she is the public affairs, or one of the deputies there in the Office of the Surgeon General. She's a colonel there in DC. So I'm thankful that we got a chance to talk today about artificial intelligence and all those wonderful things and how they implement into the military, sir. I checked out the resume. The resume is absolutely impressive, but even more so, you know, getting a chance to talk to you over these past 2 weeks, I would say, the man himself is even more impressive himself. So I'd love to, you know, have you at least share with us who you are and everything that comes with you, sir.
Yes. Again, I'm Colonel Robert Carter. I am a uniformed medical scientist in the U.S. Army, where I've served for the last 20 years, primarily engaged in scientific research to improve the quality of lives of our service members, as well as survival on the battlefield. I've spent a good portion of my career in the U.S. Army Medical Research and Material Command, now known as the Medical Research and Development Command, engaging with scientists throughout that community, as well as on the product development side. I'm a Medical Service Corps officer and a member of the Army Acquisition Corps, so I get a chance to do the scientific research, but then also have an opportunity to realize some of that capability to the warfighter, both on the medical side and the non-medical side.
Wow. So you're kind of like, for lack of a better referral, but you know, for pop culture reference, you're almost like Iron Man. It seems like hey. You've got the knowledge, and now you're implementing the knowledge into actual things that, you know, improves, supports the everyday life of the everyday soldier. Would you say, sir?
Yes. No, you're spot on. And the discussion that we'll engage in tonight really was a kind of a new opportunity for me to really think critically about an area I think that's important for American society, but in particular for the military. You know, when we think about, we go through periodically these we talk about the Industrial Revolution, and we talk about, you know, how different technologies, different processes change how humans either work or how the military fight. And I think right now what we're going through is another one of those revolutions. And that's, and I first got engaged in this area about a year ago. Had an opportunity to attend. One of my good friends was putting on a workshop at Carnegie Mellon, and I had an opportunity to sit at a round table and spend 2 or 3 days thinking about what we refer to as a future of work and how artificial intelligence is going to shape that aspect. I was there mainly, which is a lot of my research has focused on human potential and human performance, both on the cognitive and physical side. But as I began to really think about what is that next generation of soldier, what's that next generation of worker need to look like in order to be competitive, but not only that, but to improve the lives of again, our service members, but just the overall quality of life of the American public and people around the world.
Wow. So the overall American quality of life and the overall soldier, you've kind of got, I would say, you've got an idea of ideally what that person or whether male or female should look like and be like. What are you talking about? Physically or mentally, or what are you talking about?
Yeah. So really what I'm talking about is if we think about once upon a time, people perform tasks that now have been largely replaced by machine. And each time we enter into a new decade, I remember as a kid, everything I would hear was that by the time, I was probably the age I am now, humans will be completely replaced by robots. And we probably all heard that. But what we found is that the unemployment rates, obviously COVID is impacting that now, but generally the unemployment rates have been relatively low. And we've always found new opportunities and things for humans to do. With the growth of IT and cyber, we saw new opportunities in cyber awareness and also obviously to protect networks and with social media with what we're doing now would not have been possible 25, 30 years ago. So what we see is technology generally the innovation drives opportunity. But now what we're hearing is that there's going to be this sort of clash of machine and man. And now we've maybe reached that point where we're questioning what's uniquely human. And so what I would like to spend some of our time tonight talking about is sort of that future of work. And really there are 4 points that I think, that humans need to do in order to be competitive. And organizations in particular, my thesis really focused at the organizational strategic level on what organizations, and I was focused on the military, but really what gave birth to this discussion altogether was an engaged discussion with what really was the future of work for mankind, civilization. And the 4 points that really came out of this were organizations that are adaptive, and adaptiveness is a core competency. Employee satisfaction in the overall experience of the employee with the employer is going to be critical. Embracing automation. So working on aspects of an organization that is truly uniquely human and automating processes and letting the actual machine do what it's actually better at doing. And what you'll find is organizations with those 3, when they marry those with a focus on culture, development of skills and leadership, will be around for the future. And when we look, we've had a number of companies that we all grew up with as kids that failed to adapt to the age that we're living now. Yeah. Many of them started off as catalog companies, and I don't really have to name the companies, but they started off where people would go and purchase items in catalogs, and then the items would be delivered to their homes. And that was considered innovative. And then they incorporated where the service technician would come and install it, and you had a warranty. Okay. But over time, the ability of people to go in and do that service and acquire merchandise through that means was quickly replaced by the ease of the internet and other ways of being able to acquire the same product at a lower price or a similar price without actually having to go and flip through a catalog. And so what we see is that it's critical for organizations. In particular, the military has generally been on the front edge and actually driving a lot of innovation. But what we see today is for really one of the first times, in at least in American society and probably around the world, where the military is having to adapt technologies that are being developed in the private sector. An example is that we're using the internet that was developed as a requirement, a need for DoD. When we look at the internet, for example, no one really knew exactly, no one would have ever imagined that the internet would have been such a game changer. But when we look at and right now, COVID drove us to being able to utilize things like Microsoft Teams, right? We were resisting some of those capabilities that would have allowed us to maybe work more fluid in a more fluid manner, but it was disruption. And so the question is, organizations that are forced to change as a result of disruption, as opposed to being able to be part of the solution of predicting how to outperform their competitors in a disruptive environment, because we're in an era of persistent disruption, whether it's new technologies or whether it is other disruptors like COVID or pandemics or just challenges are challenges among nations that can disrupt not only the interactions of humans and machines within those countries, but also can proliferate and impact the world as well. So really being able to say, okay, how can I be adaptive in a disruptive? I'm going to basically assume that disruption is the norm. How can I ensure that my employees' experience is positive? I'm maximizing automation. I'm creating a culture that places high priority on skills and leadership is the best way. And organizations and militaries that master being able to do those things well will win in the future conflicts.
Got it. Sir, you said a mouthful, but I'm sure people are appreciative of the information that's being shared, especially yourself, myself personally. I know you gave me some slides that we're going to kind of have a conversation in regards to all the different things that you brought up previously. And so what we're going to do is pull up a full screen and allow you to just share the information that's on it, talk about it extensively. If I see something in there I'd like to jump in and maybe have a comment on, I will. If I see comments on the discussion itself, we're going to break it down and have the person or the people share their comments as well. Is that okay with you, sir?
That's great. I appreciate it.
Okay, let's jump into it, okay? And so we've got this, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my my thesis from the Army War College, like I said before, really focused on artificial intelligence and really the applications of artificial intelligence in providing that competitive edge for soldiers in future wars. And when we talk about future wars, really multi-domain, and that's the ability to really integrate the land force with the space force and the forces that we have at sea, really been able to integrate all of those to provide an advantage, but specifically from the warfighter within that land component that's on the ground. As we talk about that soldier that's cold and dehydrated and hungry in the foxhole. As we know, war is chaotic, it is lethal, and it's fundamentally a human endeavor. And when you look at all of the work that's being done, the future wars will include a human component. That human component, like in the past, will continue to play a critical role in the outcomes. However, artificial intelligence is going to play a critical role in ensuring that those humans, again, are doing things that are uniquely human, and being able to integrate artificial intelligence into the overall process is going to be critical. And so when we talk about artificial intelligence, is really what we're talking about is the ability of computers to learn, see, and communicate like humans. And there's a lot of discussion that eventually artificial intelligence will overcome or surpass the ability of humans. And I would say that would probably be the case for certain tasks. And I want to give one example of that. There's a system that has been developed by IBM called Watson. And Watson basically is a artificial intelligence system. And when we talk about artificial intelligence, that's the actual algorithms. But artificial intelligence is only as good as the data. And so when we talk about data, we're talking about almost like infinite amount of data that's available. So what Watson is really doing is IBM is developing a system that is going out throughout the medical literature. And one of their first efforts is specifically to go and be able to individualize, personalized medicine to a specific patient based on what's in the literature. So if we think about a doctor, one individual, a doctor, or even a team, a medical team at some of the best cancer centers in the world would theoretically not be able to compete with a system that is built, that is learning essentially from the medical literature, much like a human learn, but with infinite amount of computing power, if you will, and also being able to learn from medical literature regardless of the language. So it's able to comb the literature from China, the literature from India, and independent of the actual language that the literature is written in, and being able to integrate that and then provide based on the latest scientific evidence and being able to weigh that evidence in a way that humans are inherently biased away from. You know, what you find is that what doctors learn in medical school and what they learn in residencies, they practice and they have those same biases throughout their career. So if they prescribed a certain drug as a medical student and a resident, or they were working when a particular drug enters the market, that becomes their favorite drug. And there's been a number of studies specifically. Well, when you talk about Watson, it's not going to have those inherently human biases and limitations. It's going to continue to evolve. So again, I would question within a medical system, even the military, how are we going to adapt and maximize the full potential of a system like IBM Watson while allowing humans within the healthcare system to maximize what they're uniquely able to do as humans and to perform and to really provide a ideal machine-human interface that allows us to take full advantage of artificial intelligence. But what we tend to see is that humans naturally will question and challenge and present a lot of reasons why we shouldn't embrace artificial intelligence. But I think societies and civilizations that are able to maximize that potential relationship that exists between artificial intelligence will have a unique advantage. And we're starting to see some of that around the world where countries are everything from capturing imagery to be able to use that imagery for a variety of reasons. Sometime in the US that would not necessarily be socially acceptable, you know, to utilize all of the various data points and sensors that are out there. But again, some of our adversaries in other countries don't necessarily have the same ethical norms. And that brings about another aspect of culture that I was describing before. You know, how do we adapt and maximize the potential of some of these technologies without infringing on the rights of everyday humans? And obviously the military is not immune from that same challenge.
I think that was the exact question that I was going to go into. Like, say, for instance, you're in a situation where, okay, the Watson system recommends a certain medication, but the human doctors or team that's there sees the situation as well. And who makes the final call when it comes to, okay, we are going to go with this route? The computer says one thing, but the human doctor says the other thing. Who makes that final call? Do we put essentially our life into the hands of a computer system, or do we put it into the hands of doctors?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you'll be surprised actually when you really dig into some of the what's going on now. We largely put our hands already in the, you know, like for example, you know, you get into your car, you type in an address, and you go about your way to get there, and you set the conditions. Well, a lot of that is fusion of data, artificial intelligence, basically. It's providing traffic information. So we do it now, and I think we'll continue to adapt over time. We'll see more and more integration and acceptance. So there was a recent study that came out that looked at the ability of radiologists neuroradiologists to identify tumors. They were basically neuroradiologists that had training in cancer detection. So the images of patients that had a diagnosis of cancer different types of complex cancers, the doctors were asked to review those based on expert opinion. And with artificial intelligence and imagery analysis, it outperformed the doctors by twice. So it was the ability of the first of all, speed and the ability of accuracy with the system clearly outperformed. And that's an area realistically where you can push. There's so much data already out there where you can basically feed a system, ask some doctors, and then basically converge on what the truth is. And as you continue to teach that system, as you continue to practice medicine, at some point, the reality that may not be the necessary skill that a radiologist, but today based on obviously laws and other things, right? And not having a holistic acceptance of a computer system diagnosing a patient, there's some resistance. But I think over time you'll see some of that change. At the same time, when you look at robotic surgery, if you think about, we'll probably go to a point where a surgeon is performing surgery and they're about to actually make an incision or they're about to do something, and the artificial intelligence would be essentially a mentor to basically say, yeah, based on the margins, almost like when we watch like the replay from football, you remember the days when you didn't have all of the drawings and all the analysis and everything. And now you watch the game and it's almost like watching the game in real time, but there's all this superimposed knowledge that's going on that's really making the game even more interesting because they're giving statistics. Where you think that guy knows all that information? No, it's back there data mining and providing them information that they can use in real time to make it more entertaining and interesting. So if you think about what I described, if you take Watson with a surgeon in some far forward battlefield in the future, and to be able to tap into that, and they'll be able to they may have only performed maybe 100 of these particular surgeries. Now they're sweaty and cold and alone in some remote part of the world, send a unique patient, and being able to tap into Watson, use automation and robotics to be able to more accurately perform that particular task is going to be critical. But again, you raised a good point, and that's really what a lot of my thesis focused on was how do you select the right people, right? Because do you want people, there are people generally fall in a few categories. They're like early adapters of technology, and there are people that generally resist technology, and most people are somewhere in the middle. Like there's people that generally say accept technology blindly. They blindly accept whatever technology and what technology is saying, and there's people that the evidence can be insurmountable, just overwhelming amount of evidence, and they'll say, there's something that's just not right about this evidence, and they question it, and sometimes prevent technology from being able to support humans and our ability to accomplish whatever tasks we would like in a more effective manner.
Excellent, sir. So we have a question that came in. Actually, let me premise it by posting a comment because I know the exact person that actually sent this question. So the comment was, "Great man and mentor, looking forward to this." And this is coming from Mr. John Michael Williams II. I guess he has a good mentorship relationship with you. So that's excellent. Yeah. So I saw a question that he actually posted in one of the local groups. And the question is, if you don't mind answering, what are some of the qualities leaders of this next generation organizations will need to better incorporate the new technology? What policies and programs are you seeing at AFC and the Army in general to cultivate those qualities?
Yeah, no, that's a great question and interesting, question. And I'll tell you, one of the important aspects, and that's what I was talking about before, is that one of the most important qualities for the next generation of organizations, and I mentioned that before, you really need adaptive leaders that are not only willing to take blind risk, but understand the benefit of that technology and ability to actually use that. I think an important aspect as well is we're going to really need leaders that understand and are willing to actually, whether it's a shortcut course. Obviously, we're not going to be able to train everybody within the ranks and formations on artificial intelligence. But I'll tell you, I consider myself a pretty knowledgeable person. But over the course of the last year, I've learned so much about artificial intelligence, deep learning, machine learning, things that we throw around and we hear people throw around. But we really need leaders that, like I said, this is like artificial intelligence and machine learning is really the next industrial revolution. So we really need leaders that understand these capabilities, because these capabilities are really going to be the backbone of our military and how we solve problems in the future, and really how we solve problems today. Another aspect as well, and this is something that that I had a conversation with some of our recruiters about, as out recruiting scientists in particular. As a consultant, that's one of the things that I take on. And diversity is going to be critical. Diversity of thought, as we talked about, not just diversity, how we typically think about it, more gender and race, ethnicity, but really diversity of thought and inclusion. Because you can imagine in a AI rich environment, an environment that's largely driven by data, it's very, very easy for us as humans to just over rely on systems or under rely on systems. So we're going to really need leaders that also are adaptive, as I described before, and really can think critically. Critical thinking has always been, and that's another word that we throw around, that's thrown around in the military as well as in the civilian population, but really being able to critically think, that's going to be a critical dimension. Because as you described before, who's going to make that tie decision? It's going to generally be humans, right? Because we can always unplug the computer. The computer can't unplug us, right? But we can generally ignore the computer, shut the computer, ignore that information. But again, that will largely not allow us to provide or benefit from what that information, the important information that AI system is providing us. So, and it's so easy if we disagree with something that's coming out to largely discount the entire system. And again, that's human nature. So leaders that are able to be agile enough to recognize when they have to make a decision, when there's that tie, and they have to make a critical decision, what are the parameters? What are they going to use to actually make that decision? And if they make the wrong decision, are they going to be willing to use that system to make the next decision? Or how are they going to use that information? Because it's so easy to basically, once we use something and it doesn't quite work out, we question maybe our ability, our thinking, our critical thinking, our ability to strategically think, especially if there's negative outcomes like people die or we don't achieve the effects that. It's so easy for us to set things aside. I think in the future, we're not going to have that luxury. We're really going to have to be at one and really have to focus a lot of attention on the machine-human interface aspects. So again, just to recap, agility, diversity, real strategic thinking, and really being able to have confidence in your decisions. And if you make the wrong decision, this is the most important thing, that you don't feel sorry for yourself, that you pick up and as a system and the organization is agile enough not to find a reason not to allow that leader to lead, but allow that leader to be agile and be part of the overall learning that's taking place.
Excellent. Sir, let's jump into the next one. Are you good to go with this slide?
Yes.
This has been, it's absolutely interesting just taking this all in. When you said those words, that artificial intelligence is going to be our next industrial revolution, that just pinged something in my brain that, I hope it's doing the same thing for other people that's enjoying this conversation. Go ahead, sir. This is your next slide.
Yeah. So this really is the crux of my thesis in War College, and that was really based on our strategic objectives in multi-domain operations. Is the bottom line is, how do we ensure we have the agility and ability to outcompete our adversaries in environments that are integrating forces and being able to identify where forces need to be to overcome our adversaries or to win. And so my thesis is that advantages significantly outweigh the disadvantages of using AI. And there was a lot of discussion around the word create, but I intentionally use the word create and cohesive military formations to deliver the competitive advantage. And what do I mean by create? It's like I described before, some of those qualities that we really want to bring out, and we really want our soldiers and leaders to actually have. We're going to have to be able to use artificial intelligence to assess and identify some of those strengths that we need leaders to have, and be able to nurture and develop those so that we're really creating leaders. Right now, we go through kind of a natural selection process. So if you think about, we recruit from the general population, 7,000, 10,000, whatever soldiers within to do a particular job. Now they actually take an exam and then they self-select. I want to be an infantryman. I want to be a combat medic. I want to be such and such. But do we really? Then maybe they get into the job and remember I talked about that employee experience. And they get into the job and they're 18, 19 years old, but it's really not the job that they thought it was going to be. They fantasized about it. And definitely the Marine Corps, have great advertisements, and they, you want to be all you can be, or whatever. And then you get in and the job is not all you thought it was going to be. And now you are stuck for 3, 4, 5, 6 years to perform that job. How do we do a better job of helping that 18, 19-year-old? How do we maximize the use of artificial intelligence? I'll tell you, on the civilian side, there's some phenomenal work going on with artificial intelligence and talent management and human resources. And basically, how do they select people and basically help identify what the people are really good at and what the company actually need from that employee at that time. And I think we have to really, given that we recruit and we generally allow people based on their test scores. People with higher test scores get more options, and the people with lower test scores get less options. We have to become, I think, more strategic at how we, first of all, utilize the talent that we're getting, and then when we see this periodically, where our ability to attract talent is sometimes ebbs and flow with the economy and a wide variety of other factors, or how popular the military is, or viewed favorably by the general population. I think those are factors that we generally can't control. So how do we basically utilize these intelligent human management, talent management systems that we get the most out of what we're getting, and we put those soldiers and those Americans into jobs where they're going to be most likely have the best experience of their life. They go back and they spread the good word about what they got out of their service, and then it makes it easier for us to recruit. They're happy and they've supported. Maybe they stayed in or not, but again, if you think about military formations are created at the individual level. Another thing too, when we think about creating military formations, how do we use AI to assemble a team? You think about special forces, some of your civil affairs teams, they have more of a selection process. How do we take what we've learned in those specialized units, from psychological profiles, physical fitness, all of the information that we collect on all soldiers, in order to basically build those general military army formations that are not necessarily within the special forces? Because we're really going to need, it's no way we're going to have a military of 3-4 million standing, but we're going to need that 500,000 active army to behave and be able to overmatch like they were 4 or 5 million. And how do we basically use that machine-human interface that I talked about before, maximizing automation and maximizing creating that culture, that leadership, that agility that we can actually provide that overmatch. And again, this slide really is just what we see is the complexity. And so when we think about also going back to John, to William's question, again, how do we use AI to talent manage to put the right individuals in this environment, and they can actually perform and outperform the adversary? Because I'm confident that how it's traditionally done, and this is why businesses, in the private sector are really looking at this adaptive workforce and really being able to flex up and down their resources in a response to changing conditions by tapping into that next generation of labor pools so that they have economy of force, within their talent pool. And also another thing that's going on is that we're in what's referred to now, and this is something I picked up from this Future of Work conference. We've entered into a generation that we talk about is used to a gig economy, right? That's I'm gonna go drive for Uber tonight and I'll do something, I was doing the day. And it is very much about gigs. And part of this is that we have a generation, what's referred to Generation Z. They want to be multi-purpose to an organization. So within the military, we generally don't think about this multi-purpose. You come in and you got one job, and that's your job. We recruited you to do that job. Don't step outside of your lane. We have to think about, okay, how do we take full advantage of a generation that want to contribute in ways that may not necessarily be in their job, but they bring that skill set. And then how do we then take that AI, and if we have a really unique mission, how are we able to feed all that information in an agile way and on a moment's notice, create a formation based on their psychological profiles, their physical capability needs, that could be cultural, language, and basically build the smallest formation that we can put into another part of the world and provide that strategic effects that's most beneficial to the United States of America. And that's what I'm talking about. That's whatever nation is able to produce that agility and maximize artificial intelligence is going to have that advantage.
Got it. Sir, we've got a comment coming in. Let's go ahead and show it on the screen real fast. And it's coming from Colonel Thweet. She says, "This is fascinating and relevant at my current studies. Thank you for your insight. Leaders at every level will need to embrace the shift in culture. Things are indeed changing at the speed of relevance." I will want to say, though, that sometimes there are people who want to show their skill sets in multiple places, but these people that want to show their skill sets are not generally embraced by those who want to hold on to their job security, right? So with AI possibly removing folks who may not be proficient in a certain position or a certain job, and embracing those who may potentially take away that job from that other person, how do we balance? How do we soothe the pain that inevitably will be coming? That's my question to you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And from my review, and again, I'm not a human resource professional, but I will tell you what I gathered and from using my own analysis. Again, there are really three characteristics of an agile organization. And I would say, as I was talking about before, we have to maximize the ability of technology to be able to identify, again, when there's what I would say clogs in the node, right? So when there's something that's clearly preventing the flow of information or an organization from being as adaptive as possible, we have to figure out a way. And again, it's not necessarily, I would say, if you go back to my point, I would say generally an unhappy employee or someone that's not performing as well as they should is generally not having a good experience. And so how do we produce that agility where we say, yep, Robert, this is not the ideal job for you, but how do we find something for you to do that you really would enjoy doing? And again, that goes back when I talk about, our formation, I'm referring to our civilian formations as well as our military. We have to embrace an idea of that adaptive workforce. The second point is, which is very, very difficult. This one's gonna be very, very difficult within the military, and that's less hierarchy. And so traditional companies and government organizations are extraordinarily vertical and siloed. And that's just how they're designed. An employee starts with one organization with a function, as I was describing before, and then they kind of matriculate and they continue to perform that function from entry level on to management or senior management. And there are some examples where that's not necessarily the case, but generally that's the experience of most employees. But the employee that started that position as a young private or as a young lieutenant or as a GS 12, 13 or a GS 6, 5 or whatever, by the time they become a GS 15 or GS 12, whatever their goals and wherever they are in their career, it's not the same person that started off. They have gained new skills. They maybe started off, they didn't have a degree, now they've acquired a degree. And so how do we basically take that employee, so as that employee acquire new skills and new experiences, they're not siloed in one career field, and they have more flexibility, and we're able to use AI to say, yep, based on your personality, based on your assessment, and we've all had personality tests, and we look at it like, wow, man, that is exactly me. But what does your employer do with that? Generally nothing, right? Because we haven't really quite figured out how to use the information, right? And so again, we have to really change our mindset, so that we get the most of the people that we have in order to because people are expensive, and I think that's what you're going to see. The tendency is that we got to just cut the size of the workforce. And
let me ask you about that, sir. Let me interrupt there for just a quick second. You say people are expensive, but unemployment is even more expensive.
Yeah.
Potentially, this AI system that will be coming in may take away many jobs that, will have, there's secondary, tertiary effects, of course. What about the people that will be pushed to the side because typically they do not fit a certain job set? Now, is it in place for the government to essentially create more jobs to fit those that don't fit the certain ideal candidate? I mean, where do we make those decisions?
Yeah, and again, I think those are tough decisions, but I would say generally that is more of a myth, because generally you have not really seen where jobs have replaced people and pushed people into unemployment. What you generally see is that the innovation and creativity, and as we do more innovative things, that actually creates more opportunities.
More jobs, yeah.
But again, individuals also have a responsibility to be agile, right? The organization can only be as agile and as flexible and adaptive as their workforce. And then I would say generally that's where it's going to require a culture, it's going to require leadership, and it's going to require a system that's fair, right? Because if people feel like they're disenfranchised or their opinions are not valued, then that's where you tend to see, challenges within an organization. But generally, if you have leaders in an organization and just people where there's a culture of value, what you tend to see is organizations just are capable of doing a lot more than they thought they were capable of. And I'll share with you, there's a new concept that's going on in business, and you're actually seeing these spring up even more now because people are teleworking. They're referring to them as swarm teams, and these basically is where you get an assembly of employees from cross-functional groups to destroy silos and really to drive innovation solve problems, and exemplify that adaptive workforce. And what you see is that people, regardless of where they are within the hierarchy, how much money they're making, generally people want to contribute. Americans are the most, it's within the American spirit and culture to volunteer. Generally, when you volunteer, that means you're not getting paid. But countless Americans every day wake up to volunteer, whether it's that person that's at a hospital that's volunteering to show people, how to get around, or building houses for homes for Habitat for Humanity, whether it's, hurricane relief in Florida. You see millions of Americans volunteer billions of hours. So I would say it's within the American spirit. Yes, we definitely need money, but I would say, employee experience has always been so critical. Because you hear people sometimes say, I'm willing to stay here and work even though I have a better job offer because I like the people. I'm going to miss you guys, and an extra $100 or $200 a week, that's an unknown, because that's another thing too. We like security. We like feeling valued and needed as part of a team. And I would say that's not going to go away. But one of the challenges, again, of AI is that AI generally doesn't consider diversity or empathy, right? So what I'm describing is things that are uniquely human. And as humans, we're going, as I was describing before, we're going to we're going to have to recognize when and think critically and strategically on when a system is not behaving in a way that we desire. One of the risks, though, is that again, we have a certain bias, towards some of these, what I would say, more softer skills, right? Empathy, because those are things that really make us uniquely human. And the question is going to be basically, how do we balance the things that make us uniquely human with the things that's going to allow us to get the maximum performance out of a machine-human interface? But at the same time, that's where the diversity is critical. If you have all engineers, and nothing against engineers, but say if you have all engineers looking at a particular problem, they're going to see it from the eyes of engineers. But if you take and introduce psychologists into the group, now you have engineers and psychologists, and then you introduce some folks with legal background into the conversation, and as you add this diversity of thought, what you tend to arrive at is an optimal solution. And that's what I think we're really trying to achieve is optimizing the machine-human interface, not replacing the humans with machine, or not replacing or vice versa, but really, what is the optimal relationship? And we know that humans are going to play a valuable role in the future of work, and they're going to play a valuable role in the future of the military. But we have to be smart and agile enough to know what that optimal balance is.
Got it, sir. Let's jump into the next slide. Are you good to go with this slide, sir?
I'm good. I'm good.
All right, here we go.
Yeah, and so again, we've talked a lot about this, but this is what I would say is artificial intelligence today. And I put this in specifically just to show us how artificial intelligence is impacting us today. As I mentioned before, the smartphone, surveillance, navigation, banking, and all of us have received that text message that there's potential fraud. And then either it is fraud or it's not fraud, but a system that's independent of a human has identified some anomaly in the behavior. So you think about each time we swipe our credit card, there's a system, an artificial intelligence system that's collecting data, that's following our behavior. It knows where we are. It knows when we fly from New York to Chicago, and just think about how much information just from the use of our debit card, our credit card, that some artificial intelligence system is learning about us. Now you take that system and you marry it up with our social media platforms. Now, pretty much, that system probably knows your behavior better than you do. So the integration of these systems is really artificial intelligence today. And this is actually largely referred to as weak artificial intelligence. When I first heard the term weak and strong, and then there's super artificial intelligence, what I just described is all considered weak artificial intelligence. When you get into like strong artificial intelligence and what's referred to as super artificial intelligence, which we're scheduled to kind of cross some of those milestones within the next decade, some of that stuff is incredibly scary. And if we think about it, if we have leaders that have no real grasp of those concepts, it's going to be very, very difficult to be strategic as a leader without having a strategic framework and a reference point, at least, of understanding those concepts.
They did not adjust to the moving tide of technology and innovation. Sir, we've actually got a question on here, and I'm going to tell you who it's from. It is from Mr. Tony Prudhomme, right? So okay. The comment and question here is, sir, do you think that the current individual-driven AIM marketplace job selection concept versus an AI-based would lend itself to more agile organizations? Great to see you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I would tell you, definitely AI-driven systems, there's a lot of work. And I would say, specifically related to that question, there's probably a lot of analysis that needs to be done that's required on the current data that's within any data set, whether it's military or civilian. And as a process that's referred to as cleaning and data, and actually doing the aggregate labeling of data, and then you can use that data to actually build an AI system that you have confidence in. But the challenge, and that's really the base, is really so you have the collection, you have the storage, and then you actually have the actual cleaning of the data to ensure that you actually, and I would say, to really know if, our sort of, current systems, the way we manage individuals is adequate or not. We really, again, have to take those data and basically identify whether or not those data have any inherent biases, which, all data has some inherent biases, and then understand how those biases are going to impact the system that we design. And from the Future of Work conference, one of the things we talked a lot about was that unfortunately, a lot of the data, the human resource systems data, not just probably in the military, but on the civilian side, they were built off biased hiring practices. So if we take one of those systems and integrate it directly into, this is what's going to replace humans, then we'll actually end up getting the same solutions, except humans won't have any responsibility. we'll say, hey, the machine did that selection, did that pairing of that person with a particular job based on their skill sets, and also the way we code skill sets. So if you think about in the current marketplace, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because everybody may not be familiar with it, but it's a job matching, essentially. You can put in keywords, but again, I could put in a bunch of keywords, and much like resumes, right? When you look for a job in Indeed and some of the other folks that are really being agile in the space, you have to validate, okay, Carter, put that he's an expert in AI on his resume. So then the AI system selects Carter as a potential candidate. And then Carter interfaces actually with a AI-driven automated system that is doing voice analysis, is asking me questions, is validating my responses based on a robust database. And it says, yeah, Carter thinks he's an expert, but this guy, he know less about AI than the first paragraph on the Wikipedia page, right? So again, I think those are some of the complexities of a self-reported skill set. Somehow you have to be able to validate it and ensure that the aggregate data and the labeling of that individual within a robust framework is actually valid. Otherwise, you could self-report, and there will be no way of actually validating if the information is correct.
Roger that. Sir, do you have any more you want to share on this slide?
No, no, we can go to the next one.
Okay, let's jump back into the full screen, and here's the next one.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about this already, but as I mentioned before, it's one of the things that we're going to really have to work towards is the human bias towards the use of systems, but then also the data sets that I described before that may inherently contain some degree of bias. So, but I think there's some good news stories, and I took 3 of them from my research highlight on this slide, and I'll really focus on the second one. Is that companies are turning to AI to reduce human bias in recruitment, and I think that is a critical point. And the military analogy of that, and I'll share this. It's something I learned actually, but so recruiters, for example, and it's not a knock against the recruiters. They're trying to do their job the same where civilian companies were trying to recruit. But for example, if a recruiter goes into and I got this from my research. Actually, Rand has done a lot of work on this. But if a recruiter goes into a low socioeconomic community, they'll use education and other factors to help entice the individual to join. If they go to an area, and this is race, ethnicity independent, they go to a higher socioeconomic group, they typically utilize serving your country, building a better nation. This is going to be great if you decide to, maybe run for, go into politics. Service is good. But if you think about that, that is inherently human bias into recruitment. And again, maybe that person in a low socioeconomic group, they come from a family where 4 or 5 generations have served. And if you put it in a context, well, your family has served, 4 or 5 generations. So, serving, and they may not even be very interested in education. So again, humans, the way humans recruit other humans can be inherently biased at times. And then also the second point that I'll make on this is autonomous cars. And so this is real data, and people will even question whether or not the data are valid. But if you think about one crash out of every almost 2 million miles of an autonomous car that's out on the road, there's one crash almost every 2 million miles. Whereas humans, there's one crash every half million miles. So you could draw from this that autonomous cars are at least 3 to 4 times less likely to actually, kill a human than another human driving a car. But if there's one autonomous car accident, we're automatically like, no, autonomous cars are no good, and so that's the inherent human bias. So I think it's the combination of those 2 factors, right? Is how do you use AI to reduce human bias, and how do we become less biased against AI? Is going to be the framework that's going to allow us to be an organization that can operate in the future force, future operational environment, and be an agile organization that we would like to be.
Excellent. Sir, you want to jump into the next slide?
Yeah, we go to the last one. I think this is the last one. So this is kind of really my summary slide. And when we think about technology, and these are my 4 points here. Technology will continue to augment human jobs, hands down, as it always has. If you go back to whether it was the invention of some early technology that reduced, that revolutionized every industry from agriculture to assembly lines, which are the fabric of the country, right? Agriculture and making stuff. Automation has helped that process, and we'll just continue to see artificial intelligence and disruptive technology in general augment human jobs. And we have to really, I think, as an organization, in particular within government, DOD, within the Army, to look at artificial intelligence algorithms as being co-workers to humans. Automation as being co-workers as opposed to someone that's taking my job. If you think about the mindset and mentality, if I view you as a teammate, then that's a very different relationship. If I view you as someone that's coming here to take my job, I may intentionally sabotage you. And so what we need is really a workforce that is going to look at AI as a co-worker than as a competitor. Technology, go ahead.
I've got a crazy question. Looking at this slide that you presented to me, as a man of color who has gone through the multitude of places to apply for work, try to be part of certain teams, I may not traditionally get the benefit of the doubt or given the opportunity to be part of that team, simply because of my color. Let's be 100% real here. Those who may see AI as a means of, hey, you're taking away my job, may see AI as a disruptor to the comfort that generationally they may have. How do we combat? Because we could push for the AI and the support of what AI may do to embrace diversity, but how do we combat those who may see it as a disruptor of their comfort?
Yeah. No, you're spot on. And in fact, one of the working groups at the Future of Work conference, in fact, my good friend Conrad Tucker, who's professor at Carnegie Mellon, is a engineer of color, African American, and he shared an example actually that happened to him in Germany in particular, around this same concept that you're. Yep. So that's going to always be some degree of resistance. 100% of systems that are working towards providing a team that introduces diversity, and there's going to be a lot of question of the validity, and people are going to question the validity of these systems, and I think that's why it's so important for the folks that's being trained in AI to be diverse, because the only way you can essentially ensure that, again, that the systems are fully or at least considered to be accepted is to ensure that you have a diverse group of folks that understand the systems and are actually working to build the systems and actually working to create the systems that's going to create that collaborative relationship. So now you're spot on. Otherwise, there's obviously always been a lot of criticism of the pharmaceutical industry that many of the clinical trials didn't include diversity. They took a population, they went to the most homogeneous population so that they could collect data on a genetically similar population, age, gender, to basically get through the process. And you could just well see if I'm trying to build an actual database algorithm. Well, one of the things actually is that what you'll see is that in AI, folks with systems that are pulling from the most robust, clean data sets will actually be the ones that are most useful. So I think what you'll see, if folks are intentionally trying to shape and create AI and deep learning and machine learning algorithms that are inherently biased or limiting, what you'll see is that those systems just won't be embraced. And I think that fortunately, you begin to see more diversity within the technology space. And I think that's an area that we really got to continue to focus to ensure that we advocate for diversity, and also that we educate all groups, in particular people of color, which tend not to pursue science, engineering, the STEM as aggressively, but we make sure they're part of that community. And that's my last point, is that the workforce really needs to develop a certain level of comfort and acceptance of that collaboration that is best for the workforce of the future. And again, the only way you achieve that is actually having diversity within STEM, because largely a lot of these systems are going to be developed by folks that are in the IT space, computer engineering, and they have to have a voice at the table. The Future of Work conference was intentionally, Conrad, my colleague, really worked aggressively to ensure that there was diversity with age diversity, gender diversity, race, ethnicity diversity, folks that were born in the U.S., not born in the U.S. diversity. So ultimately, what you end up with is a robust system that is not built with inherent bias in mind. And then like I said, there's a lot of the major companies around the world with robust data. Google, Amazon, they're really working aggressively with Deloitte and some of the major consulting companies to really develop some of these robust, smart talent management systems.
I will say two things, sir. Yes, I do agree that, the upcoming generations need to have the opportunity to be trained, brought up in STEM, embrace engineering, math, science, technology, etc. But the infrastructure needs to be built to have these future generations to come about so they can actually have not just a seat at the table, but they're embraced as initiators of that table's conversation. If you get what I'm saying, sir. So
yes,
I fully agree. I fully agree with what you're saying. The second thing I want to say is the gatekeepers of those that are making these decisions in AI, the data feeders, the gatekeepers of who am I allowing to come in and actually feed this information into the data infrastructure, etc. They need to be willing to embrace a diverse voice and point of view as well. Because typically what you will find, unfortunately, you will be you as a military individual, you're going to be at a position for a certain period of time and you move on. But you're going to have individuals who will still be there in the long run, who are part of the long-term, the long-term carry-on sort of individuals. And they may not be very well embracing of diversity. They may not be very willing and able to embrace people of different points of views and cultures, etc. Hopefully, and I'm an optimistic guy, hopefully they will be in the long run.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, that's always going to be a challenge when you have humans involved. But I'm hopeful that the military, the private sector will continue to seek maximal opportunity to have leaders that embrace diversity in the broadest context. And I think the critical diversity of thought is so critical. And that's going to really be critical to be able to have that dialogue, and also for self-reflection. For leaders to reflect and say, and again, we talk about critical thinking and challenging the way we think, challenging how we see the world, but really being able to operationalize that we create the future workforce, not just the future fighting force, the future workforce, both private and public, that is thinking about diversity in a broad context to ensure, because again, if you embrace diversity in the purest sense, then what you naturally will have is race, ethnicity diversity. You're going to have gender diversity. You're going to have a diversity. The group is not going to all be, born in the U.S. You're going to have some folks that are born outside the U.S. part of the conversation, because at the end of the day, you're really looking at a group of folks that can actually make decisions and build relationships, really creating a dream team. I remember like in basketball, when we first talked about like the Olympic dream team. And if you look, the first few years, they just picked like the best athletes in the NBA. And then they begin to think more about, okay, if we want to win, we need to think more critically about the actual diversity. And there's not a lot of diversity, obviously, within the NBA from the perspective of these guys are all like, all rock star athletes. But if you think about when in a workforce that is having to do and to accomplish and work on a diversity of tasks, so you think about the military today, we're working on a pandemic response, and tomorrow we may be working on how do we save lives from the Army Medical Department in combat. Tomorrow we're working on how to evolve a healthcare system to become more agile, to be able to provide the best care to the military service members, the retirees, their families, and veterans. So that's the agility within the medical department, that we're having to work through. But combat arms or the other branches are having to work through that same. How do you ensure that you actually have folks that are thinking and engaging in the most diverse solutions? Because one of the things that's so easy is to try and just get the thing done. And we see that every day, because generally people want to get the task done. Just get the task done. And then if someone questions, the work, they say, man, we put 50 hours into this already. And we're not very patient for diversity of thought. And I would say we're probably even less tolerant if the diversity of thought comes from someone that is a minority, whether it's gender, race, ethnicity. They're less likely, and there's a lot of research on this, they're less likely to challenge the road to Abilene. And I'm sure everybody's familiar with the paradigm, the road to Abilene. They're less likely to challenge that, right? So that's why diversity of thought and all of these are critical, that if you really want to have an agile workforce that can be innovative, where you have a culture that can actually solve problems, and most importantly, have a culture that's going to actually adapt to the way I look at AI and smart systems. This is just another dimension of diversity. It's just another group that is involved in a conversation. But if we don't actually have a workforce that embrace the diversity of thought, diversity of race, ethnicity, gender, that is current within how we're going to how we're going to embrace diversity of machine-human interface, and really view that AI system as a co-worker when we don't really trust them, right? And that's the other huge piece. I think going back to William's point is that we have to have trusting leaders that we trust, that humans trust, and because the AI system will one thing it will be able to do that often we can do, but it's going to have a lot more data to basically say, yeah, Carter, the same situation, he made a very, very different decision yesterday. So Carter can't be trusted. So I'm gonna have a, don't trust Carter, like
You've been flagged.
yeah, Carter, his decision making is not consistent. And you'll be able to see those biases. And I think that's our fear. As part of our fear is that we have a certain amount of we really don't want someone to be able to look at our decision making as leaders as transparent as maybe some of these AI systems will afford. And sometimes you hear like some of our leaders, again, folks with a lot of time, they'll say, yeah, this leader voted X amount of times on this or whatever. And that's humans back there collecting that information. But in the future, we'll be sitting there watching, whether it's legislators or whatever, and there'll be like a trust, of how that guy or gal voted, on issues similar. It'll be like watching the football game, right? Yeah. When we're watching, like whether it's state or congressional or whatever, when they're making decisions, we'll have that trust factor. and nobody really wants, realistically, as humans, we we want to be transparent, but often at our own discretion. We don't want it to be, transparency.
We got you, sir. We've got two more comments here, and I'd like to close off our discussion. We've got
Okay.
one from Mr. Jose Espajo Ali Gaha Aga. Said it's interesting. My Spanish is not that good. I apologize if I messed up your name. And we've got one from my frat brother, Mr. Keith Taylor. He said, great topic and featured speaker. I look forward to continued discussions. I think the discussions will be upcoming. This is obviously something that I really enjoyed, and other people have actually enjoyed our discussion as well. We had a consistent viewership during the entire discussion. But sir, I just wanted to say to you, just thank you for this enlightening conversation regarding AI and our embracing of AI, whether we know it or not. The people who may want to counter AI, and AI tells the truth, because I think a philosopher once said that men lie, women lie, and numbers don't.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say thank you for coming and talking with me. Hang out in the broadcast room. Let's talk a little bit more, sir.
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
And we will talk to you again. All right, sir?
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. And so we had just an excellent conversation with Colonel Carter. I hope you all enjoyed that discussion. Of course, if you have questions and if you want to possibly get in contact with Colonel Carter, send me a message and I'll connect you with him. And moving forward, I want to say to you all, I'm glad to be back and having these discussions with you all again. I embrace all of those people who may be leaders in whatever organization or whatever industry they're in. If you're a business leader, if you're a marketer, if you're a military personnel, if you're a community leader, or if you're just a wise man or woman on the street, I'd love to have you on my podcast and just have you share that wealth of knowledge that you have. So I like to say, take care of yourself, take care of your family, and take care of others. Bye now.